I was gonna sure enough teach them. For God's sake, I went to Florida A&M. What do you mean you're going to teach me about race? And I also thought race was individual acts of meanness. I had no idea it was a construct. And I had no idea that the work I was doing, particularly as a nonprofit chair, was maintaining that construct, and I was devastated. Um, it broke me to a place of humbleness, into a place where I'm thirsty for this knowledge. I've only been to at least one for the last 25 years. And I plan to go to one each and every time I can, because it's the one place that I get to just stop and reflect on how much Kool-Aid I've drank during the course of the year. And then make sure I got folk that are accountable. The one thing I can say about this work, it saved my life, the life of my wife, and all of my children. We've all gone through it. And it has been the one best decision that we've made collectively as a family. And everyone in my family is organized.
That's high praise, Chuck. Thank you so much. Dina has joined us.
Yes, I am. I'm so glad to see you and Monica and Wanda and my friends in Palm Beach County. We have a long, long history. And, Dr. Robinson, especially because you and Chuck, I think, Keith was a young lad when he came on. I remember when he was in the classroom, and I've just seen him kind of grow up in this process. So that has been amazing. But you've been at this for a long time. I mean, I remember being with Ron Chisholm out at Belglade at an elementary school in Suzanne doing workshops. And, some people are getting on their racial equity journey, but you've been on it. And people are just getting on it and asking us, what kind of results we can expect. And so from someone who's been on, right? I mean, it's just like, so, what do you hope to get out of this? And I think the organizing that you all have been doing has led to this environment today where people are beginning to name systemic and institutional racism. And I know that it's been tough, but your organizing, while it started in the school, adopted a community model. The community model is that the school system alone can't fix these problems. And so you started bringing in the faith leaders. You started bringing in, of course, that's how we met Lauren and Palm Health and Seth at United Way. At the Urban League, you all have, really encompassed this. And so just want to, you can start, Dr. Robinson, but any of you met Barbara, and Barbara had gone to racial equity workshops, but undoing racism workshops, but I met her at a workshop that was organized, that was initiated by you all and then organized out in the community. So the school system is doing theirs, the community is doing theirs, and there's a combination of that. So to talk about the patience that it takes, and one of the things that, I tell people, we're not going to see hard, concrete numbers because this thing is deep and it's complex. I think what we're going to see first, and it might take 10 or 20 years, is that people not resisting anymore, people buying in and saying, oh yeah, now I see race as a problem. So you can't go from, going to a workshop and then thinking that you can go in your classroom or your examining room or your courtroom. There are definitely things and awareness that you can bring that are going to impact your decisions. But as far as institutional outcomes, if you all can talk about, the perseverance and what that's been like. And then Chuck, I want you to talk about, because one of the things we're struggling with today is this multi-generational movement approach, right? And you're of the, I know what side of the multi-generational room you're on. And so I want you to maybe talk about, how you've kept those kind of things going on. So Dr. Robinson, you want to say a little bit about, the perseverance, the patience, the longevity of this work?
Well, I mean, it's almost like you said it all. It's like I am affirmed when I talk to you and you say, I haven't fixed it yet, because I get so frustrated, and every time I'm running for reelection, I say to people, well, like, wait a minute, what have I accomplished? Like, we haven't fixed this yet. And people have to give me the baby steps forward, right? So that I can say, okay, well, all right, I'll take that baby step, but we haven't fixed it. And so it becomes just, it becomes actually sometimes exhausting, trying to figure out which way to go and what game you have to play today to dismantle this piece of this thing over here, right? So, but I want to tell you about a small victory that we had recently. And so there was a proposal to change the school district's organizational chart. And I won't get too far in that because it wouldn't be politically correct for me to say the whole thing, right? But the thing that did my heart such good, and Chuck could talk about this too, is that we educated the members of the Coalition for Black Student Achievement and Unify as to the significance of this issue, right? And the community said, we want the deputy superintendent title to become the deputy superintendent / chief officer of equity. And they said that because the organizational chart and the budget tells you where your moral compass is as an organization. And if we're going to say the word equity, we need to demonstrate our belief in that in the org chart, and instead of making it like a side person, right? And so it was just fantastic because when folks called in, because we're meeting virtually still, so when people called in with their public comment on the issue, there was like an hour's worth of public comment on this. I mean, the superintendent took it off the agenda. And even with people, about half of the people decided that they did not need to have their message played because it was taken off the agenda. There was still like an hour's worth of public comment, right? And so now people know that you can't, if you work together, if you understand this aspect of the game, that you can win, right? And so yesterday, and I'm not going to talk much longer now, yesterday at the board meeting, one of the board members brought forward a proclamation saying that we stand against racism, right? And it was drafted by the Florida School Board Association, and they asked all the districts to sign it, blah, blah. So she brought this forward, and, and everybody, because, we're also woke right now, right? We're just woke. And so everybody was just like, yes, it's fabulous, blah, blah, blah. And by the time they got to me, I was pretty disgusted. So I said, well, I'm pretty tired of proclamations. I'm tired of resolutions. I'm tired of marching. I'm tired of protesting. I want to know when we're going to do something, right? And so I just spit out my mouth. Are we ready to proclaim that we want Palm Beach County School District to be an anti-racist school district? Hey, they did roll call. Every board member said yes. I was like, hot damn. I said, I've been waiting for this 20 years just to say the damn words, right? Now, okay, so I know it's going to be another uphill fight to move the ball uphill, right? But damn, it's been 20 years to get the board to say it. So yeah, I mean, it just takes way too long. That's all I got.
I love your energy, and you're right. I mean, we just have to keep moving the needle. And if you're attached to outcomes, you're going to get burned out. You're going to get cynical. I know it's frustrating. I know it hurts because you've been through multiple superintendents. We've been through multiple superintendents with you, and all kinds of central office turnover, all kinds of instructional staff turnover, and yet these achievement gaps persist. And so we are so happy that you're there, and you can see these little victories, because everybody doesn't have to be doing the same thing everywhere, but we got to be doing something where we are. So yes, I'm honored to be among you. So Chuck, can you say a little bit about this, the organizing component of this? Because the school system alone, especially in regards to accountability, need to have a community base to check in with, and that can do the kind of things that they need to do to push from their side. Can you talk about that multi-generational thing y'all do?
Yeah. So, and there's several examples of it, right? Both Unify and the coalition has become one. When when Dr. Robinson started the work with the coalition, she was a teenager. She had 3 kids, but uh, yet a teenager. We actually raised our kids together doing community work through that organization, and our kids grew up in it, right? And now I hear her as she talk about the work her kids are doing, and I talk about the work my kids are doing. That's the for me the most part of the most rewarding piece. But the one I want to tell you about is a table we have in Delray called the Elders Table. And to get to be an elder, you have to be organizing. I don't mean this has to be your age. You have to be organizing in a neighborhood for 50 years. Or you just don't get the title of elder, right? The person who is the most senior elder has been organizing in the same neighborhood of 1,000 blocks for 70 years. 70 years. He's 91 years old now. And he's the first one to every community meeting. And what he has taught me about these resilient institutions and how you actually dismantle this work is by staying the course. So of all the folk I know, he's the most woke. It's not because he got the rhetoric down. He has the lifestyle down of showing up, speaking truth to power, making sure that he creates space by having a convening table for folk who are just starting to come in and share what they see. And then the elders, after the first hour, then they'll say, well, in 1935, when that showed up in this community, this is how we addressed it. And then when it showed up again in 1945, this is how we addressed it. And when it, and by the time they get to where we are, the lesson learned is that none of this is new, that these institutions remake itself, but the commitment still has to be to dismantling it and doing anti-racist work. And that you have to have, you can't look at it in terms of did it happen over a 90-day period, right? So like if we don't resolve this before the election, can we like commit to organizing to the next election? And if it's not dismantled by that cycle, can we try it again each and every day? And so now you hear in Delray, you can hear the young lions talking about how to sustain it. It's talking about resisting institution. When we say woke in Delray, it ain't a nightmare. It really is about some clarity about anti-racist work. And I love the work we're doing. I just love that work.
Yeah, you know what I say about, the whole woke thing, it's biologically impossible to stay woke, right? So you can wake up every day, but if you stay woke, that's not gonna last for too long. But thank you. That's just so powerful what both of you have shared. Monica? Barbara, is there anything you wanted to weigh in? You're muted, Monica. Barbara, is there anything as somebody who has, plugged into all this stuff that's been working in so many different areas and so many different ways around the organizing, and now plugged into this network and added to it?
Yeah, I'm smiling because when I realized that I had done the Undoing Racism work many years ago, and I had said I was done. I'd done it. Nothing changed. I was finished. And when Deborah Robinson tried to get me to come to REI, I think it took her about 1.5 years to get me into a room again. And finally it was like, are you coming or not? And I said, fine, I'll come. And that changed me more than it changed me many years ago when I first did the Undoing Racism. I guess it has to happen at your time in life. And that was my time in life. But the organizing part of it now, what excites me, the school district has done such an amazing job to see it happen in the community. Our United Way, literally putting dollars behind the REI training, our Children's Services Council, community partners, community organization, Lawrence, Palm Health Foundation, to have our foundations, our leaders of every foundation in this community has gone through this work and is committed to it. I'll let Lauren talk about where they're taking it down the road, but that excites me. And I finally had to realize that it's not what we study, it becomes who we are. And that was a revelation for me. I mean, I had to take this anti-racism, racial equity mindset into every single thing I do. And that's the only way. I can't convince people to come to the table. It doesn't work that way. You know, we just have to keep it going in every community that we enter. We have a huge growth now in our faith community. We're about to do an REI workshop that's pastors only. We've done a couple of churches. We brought 2 white churches, 2 black churches, one of them a Seventh-day Adventist church and one a Baptist church, to the table to do a faith-based REI. And now the pastors are coming because they want to know what their parishioners are talking about. You know, so they're coming back to the table. So I see it's difficult, and it's really difficult today. I was on a call before this, and Deborah just used the word exhausted. You know, it can be exhausting because we really want to see something happen and we care. But to see as many people in this community, Lauren and I mentioned that we've begun OAR, the Organizing Against Racism Alliance. We had 2 meetings before the COVID outbreak. So we tried a virtual one a couple of weeks ago. We had no idea how it would work. And we had 62 REI alumni on a virtual call on a Tuesday night at 5:30, which I thought was amazing. One of our technically sound members was able to split us into a black caucus and a white caucus so we could be together for at least 45 minutes and then come back together. And people are waiting for the next one. You know, so I'm seeing small incremental, and I realize a lot of the interest we're seeing today is because everybody is woke. Dina, I like that. It's biological and possible. But if we can shake people enough to keep them woke for as long as we can, and I think we can make some more substantive changes.
Yeah, Dina, I was going to say, I really would like for you and Suzanne to lead in this interview because you guys have been on the ground with Dr. Robinson and with Barbara and with the whole crew. I will ask one thing, and that is that, I mean, to stay at it, because I think groups enter and engage thinking that it's short term, that you take a workshop, you go and you do something and you resolved everything. And it just doesn't work like that. So I'm curious as to the maintenance of this work, because there are political fights when, you know, times when people want to cease supporting and all of what goes into keeping this work. As a matter of fact, I used to love the phrase that one of the groups used, is keeping race on the table. So I don't know, Dr. Robinson or Barbara or any of you, or Mr. Ridley or Laura, any of you, how do you do that? How do you keep it going? Now, somebody's got to answer that question.
Okay, I'll take a shot at this. This is Dr. Robinson. So what I've come to realize, so Chuck keeps telling me I'm an organizer. So I'm just like recently accepting that, because I don't know, I had this other thing in my head, but what I realized is that I was raised by organizers, right? And even though one was an attorney and one was a teacher, they were community organizers. And so I went, my whole life I was babysat at city commission meetings and NAACP meetings and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, it was just like what you do, right? And like my youngest son is texting me trying to figure out where does he step in to help with community service, since that's how we're framing it in that conversation, right? But it's just knowing that for me, that I have been so very blessed that I can't walk away from my brothers and sisters who have not been similarly blessed. I don't know, maybe I just wasn't raised that way or something. I don't know. But I also know that if I stop, my parents will get up out their graves and whoop my behind. I'm just saying, like, because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think my story is the same. And in Palm Beach County, if you're a son or a daughter of Delray Beach, you learn that life. So you was born yesterday, well, you start organizing tomorrow. Let me share something that happened to me on Father's Day. One of the primary organizers that grabbed me at 4 years old, seriously, 4 years old, just start my civic engagement, called me, this phone. And her sister her name is Miss Libby Wesley. Miss Libby Wesley transitioned less than a year ago, but I learned her phone number like when I was in high school because she's been calling me since high school. I'm 63 now, so well over 50 years she was calling me. And when I saw her phone number, it wasn't a number that I had saved. I just knew what her phone number was and freaked like, Lord, why is Miss Wesley of all people calling me today? And then her sister got on the phone. And what she said in terms of so validating about how and why we do this work, that is no doubt why I won't quit and why I understand how to affirm the organizers coming behind me. So the reason I don't quit is because of you organizers know how to make out. Every time I'm through, you pull me back in for another 40,000 miles because you understand. It's you. It's the relationships I have with other organizers who nurture me, who see me for who I am, and help me understand exactly what my role and purpose in organizing at this time. I can't do this work without the other organizers affirming. And every time Dr. Robinson tried to quit, all I got to do, I'll call her to an elders breakfast, and they will affirm her the same way. I mean, we have Keith. If you ever try to quit, we come in and get you. Barbara, we'll come get you. We are not letting you quit because you're too important to this work, and it's up to organizers to know that. It's just up to us to know how to nurture and maintain each other.
I'd like to add something to that because the organizer is a title that I did not accept easily and still don't always accept easily. And I think I began to accept it in the last couple of years as I started to actually organize official REI workshops. And I look up and have anywhere from 30 to 40 to, Suzanne will remember, one time almost 60 at the table that we never want to see happen again. But I think we have to understand who we are as organizers and where we are. We don't all organize in the same place. I can't go in the same blocks as Chuck to organize. They don't know who I am. I'm not a child of Palm Beach County. I'm a native New Yorker. I've been here for 30 years, but the natives still tell me I'm not from here. So I had to decide where I could work. And where I could work was with those nonprofit organizations and with people who are, our newest focus is people in our business community, because we're not seeing them at the table right now. But so we have to decide where we are. And I think Chuck and I were on a conversation one night with Dr. Robinson and someone else, and it was where you can go and who you can speak to. And Chuck won't remember this probably, but he said to me, there's some places you can't go, people will laugh at you. And he's right. But I have to know where I can go. So I think we have to make other people understand that they are organizers just like the people on this call. And they have places that they can adeptly organize, and they have to realize where that is. Because it's a difficult title to accept for some people.
I want to add to what you're saying about how do you keep it going. I think in the training, you talk a lot about the balance of power and how important power is. And I think through the community and through like Chuck and Dr. Robinson through the years, working to balance that power. So in some institutions, if the school district has the power and kind of just says, this is what we're going to do, people can tend to accept it. So how do you balance that power where you have a community that stands up and says, no, we need to listen. And then I would say in conjunction with when this training first came out and started, Dr. Robinson and Mr. Ridley talked about how it started with a small group and slowly expanded. So then educating people, about the truth, about how things existed, and how over time that small group of individuals has grown to other people to listen to now it is so much more in the community. And I think that balance of power continues to grow, but it's being able to be held accountable and listen to that to the stakeholders. And Mr. Ridley will hold me accountable and whoever else accountable when he needs to. So, and that's important. to keep that going. Then I would also say that it can get very frustrating on a day-to-day work, because you just get embedded in so many other things in the work, and then oh wait, I got to think about racial equity in this. I got to think about racial equity in this and that. And it was a conversation with Dr. Robinson one time. It's like it exists everywhere. So in any piece of work, just because you're doing something around a curriculum or something, but it also is over here and it's there. So it was kind of an eye opener that you've always got to have that lens on no matter what you're doing, which it's difficult at first, but I think once you start to train yourself, it can get easier. Like Dr. Robinson, obviously she's trained well. She holds us accountable as well to think like that. So also to keep it going, I think the best thing is just to have someone like Dr. Robinson on your school board, and community activists helps a lot as well.
But
Yeah,
can I follow up to that?
Yes.
So I don't think that I'm trained well, right? Like, no, seriously. So this is the thing. So, but what I do is I intentionally put myself in places to ask people, do you see the Kool-Aid in my hand? Is the Kool-Aid in my hand? Am I drinking the Kool-Aid? Please, God, I don't want to be making the Kool-Aid, right? Like, so and so you have to like keep those people around you, because these words, they just string together words and they'll sound just fine if you're not tuned in and listening, right? So we have a district diversity and equity committee, right? They had a meeting this morning. Big long conversation about, do we have a common definition of what equity is, people? Like, no, right? And so what are we talking about, right? And then it morphed into, and get ready, Mr. Oswald is coming, that they're going to have a special meeting to talk about equity in the school reopening plans. And I'm like, bravo, because it's there too, right? Like, and so this is a growth process. Like for me, I know folks think I think people in Palm Beach County think like I'm the pseudo Dina, right? I'm just trying to figure this thing out, and I accept that, and let's figure it out together, right? That's my whole point. So.
Yeah, I just, you are a force to be reckoned with. I know that, you just come in and you just say what's on your mind, because Dr. Robinson for years came in and opened up the workshop, and you never know what she's going to say to the participants. And so you just sit there and kind of squeeze and hold on and see what she's going to say about it. And, just between you and I, Dr. Robinson, nobody else, I know how important this is, because I've seen you cry. I've seen you cry in workshops. I've seen you cry trying to talk about this, because this pains you. And, that authenticity in this work, I think, is absolutely necessary. I tell people, we had Judge Trosh, Lou Trosh, she's a judge in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And I said, also, feels very deeply about this. And, we say, worry when you stop crying. And so, because this should not be okay. It's not acceptable. And now that other people are joining, I've heard you the last couple of sessions, maybe the last year or two, say, so you see, I'm not crazy. That's what you say a lot. It's like, oh, now y'all know I'm not crazy, because I've been the crazy woman at the school board meetings. I've been the outspoken person, just saying these really blatant, brutally honest things about race. And now you have, look at Lauren, she's a little ginger, she's out there, her face is out there, she's in front of stuff, and she's there with you. And so Lauren, can you say a little bit about, I know you were just talking about you getting into that, but I think it is so important that all of these moving parts, you don't have to be doing the same thing, but you're doing something. But I appreciate the organizing that you're doing in your realm, so that Dr. Robinson now is saying, you see, I'm not crazy, right? Because everybody's heard her say that. It's like, now y'all know I'm not crazy.
I never thought Dr. Robinson was crazy. I thought she was passionate, right? And I always appreciate from Dr. Robinson, her and I emailed back and forth recently, and I said, you know, even if you're not meaning to, or you're too tired to teach, she's constantly educating me, and I really appreciate that. And I think in my work, it's been the most important that I'm taking those moments to really listen to it and really take it in and understand what it means for me as a gatekeeper in my role. Also recently I've thought about, you know, how I keep it going is every day thinking about what it means for me to be a gatekeeper and what I need to do with that power to turn it around for every meeting I sit in, for all of the other white people I'm working with, and reminding them how they could, you know, are gatekeepers and what does that mean for them and in their jobs. Someone recently said to me, you know, how can you be a pathfinder? You know, from a gatekeeper to a pathfinder. And I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what that is in my role. And I keep going back to that idea because of the opportunity I get to do to work in neighborhoods now, to work alongside residents, is that I am not the pathfinder, they're the pathfinders, and I'm there just lucky enough to be a part of that journey. And so making sure that the nonprofits, the funders that I'm constantly working with and sitting with, that they really are thinking of it that way too. Our community has taken this shift even in the last few weeks that I have not sat in a meeting, provider meetings, funder group meetings, where we don't start with, what does this mean right now for us? People are leading meetings with these check-ins, and it, you know, I'm an infant to this work. And that's not just talking about age, it really is my own awakening to this work. And it even feels different to me in the last, you know, 5-6 years that I've been doing this, to in, you know, so many different realms, to lead meetings, to end meetings, to talk about, you know, equity at the tip of your tongue all the time, is exciting. It's encouraging. I remember when I first met Dina, and right after I went to the first Racial Equity Institute workshop, you know, us white folk, we want to know what we're going to do right away, right? We want to jump to it. And I remember, Dina, you saying to me, when I asked what could I do next, you said, come back to the racial equity workshop. And I thought, okay, I can come back. And I think after the next time you said, nope, you got to keep coming back to the racial equity workshop. And I talked to Chuck, and at that point, he'd already been to 27 of them. And I thought, okay, I can keep coming back, but at one point do I? And I think around the 7th time I went, I finally took it and I understood what that was, is I needed to have those places to reflect, and to have that constant communication and clarity around this work. What has happened in the communities that I'm working with the nonprofits is reflection groups have come around, where it's maybe smaller groups of a mix of residents and professionals, you know, everyone from what I would consider direct line staff, the staff that are out there, right, you know, on the streets, to all the way to administrators sitting together really on their own time to reflect on race equity and institutional racism. And what I appreciate about OR is the conversation we have in there about that we come as individuals, but we can't ever really take off our hats. And so we are our partners, we are those gatekeepers, and we can bring that personal passion. But it has helped us, I think, in OR too, and Barbara, you can tell me if I'm getting this right, but it has helped us to think about the work of OR. And for all of, we have a really mighty list of organizations and CEOs as a part of OR. And what are they going to do when they walk out of that caucus? And what does that mean for them? Most recently, Palm Health Foundation, which is one of the foundations that supports Be Well PBC and is the prime funder for these 6 Healthier Together communities I mentioned. They, said, they've sent their board and all their staff and supported the Healthier Together communities to have to send lots of people to the workshops and having conversations, and said, that's not enough. And so they formed a recent alliance with, it's now 6 funders total, where they made a statement of 5 commitments that they communicated out already to the community to say that we are going to hold each other accountable as funders. We are asking the community to hold us accountable to if we're getting this right. We are going to continue to educate ourselves. We are going to continue to look at how we are spending not just our dollars, but all of our resources. And again, a moment where it felt like, okay, maybe there's going to be some major shifts, because we're talking about 6, probably some of the 6 largest funders in our community, or 6 of the largest funders in our community, making this very big statement. And so when those funders make a statement and hopefully really commit to it, then that will affect all the providers they fund. It will affect all of the community receiving services. And so I am very hopeful, and we're lucky that those CEOs are sitting in OR, so we can hold them accountable in there too.
So we're in a moment. And I know that all of you, as we are being inundated with new interest, or renewed interest, perhaps, with some people. I wonder how you are planning to accommodate that, to capture that interest, to go, as Lauren just said, to go from making the statement to really making the commitment to change and do things in an equitable, a racially equitable way. So are you having those conversations, or have you already had them and you're in the middle of it?
I think we're in the middle of them. And, Lauren just spoke about the OR, and I there's one partner I've not mentioned that I'd be remiss if I didn't, and that's our county. Palm Beach County has, in 2 of their departments for a while, been sending folks through their community services department and the youth services department, have been supporting the workshops. Our county administrator and our then county mayor put out an edict about 7 months ago that the top 125 management folk in the county would go through a Racial Equity Institute workshop, which I think is substantial. And their plan is to go from there to people who have direct lines to communities. The only thing that's kept them from going through now was, of course, COVID. But Suzanne, to answer to your question, I think a lot of it is just really keeping us at that table and keeping one another accountable. Because with the renewed interest, we could put lots more people through the workshops, but if they just walk through the workshops and go home, that will do nothing. But rise the numbers and people that have gone through the workshop. And I think that the same way that Dr. Robinson says, tell her if she's drinking the Kool-Aid, our nonprofit directors, our White Caucus leader is one of them, is a guy who runs a major nonprofit in the community. And he constantly says, am I doing this right? Am I drinking the Kool-Aid? He doesn't use the Kool-Aid reference, but he's asked the question with sincerity. So I think that or had we not had that, I would be a little bit more worried about where the future goes after all these people start going through in this moment. But I think that will keep us grounded and staying together after coming out of the workshop. But I think that's important. Up until 6 months ago, we never really had, outside of the work that Dr. Robinson did with her after folks at the school district, we never had a real place for people in the community at large to come together. And OR is providing them that now. So I think that's a mechanism that we have going forward.
And it's so important that you have it in place now. You're not putting it in place. You have it in place. There's a place for people to land, either in the school work or in the community work. It's just incredibly important that you've already done that piece. celebrate.
I wonder if you can also talk about, you know, some of the pitfalls and challenges. I know, you know, Lauren, we've certainly, you know, been in meetings. You all have brought some of the, you know, key stakeholders, you know, systems leaders, organizational leaders in the room, and, you know, people that, you know, sort of believe in the analysis and want to do the right thing, but also have an organizational approach to solving problems that is not aligned with sort of racial equity principles or the concepts. And so I remember, you know, some of the organizations just, you know, moving ahead with some initiatives, and, you know, people went out there, and you have to go out there and you know, trial and error, or launch whatever it is that you're going to launch. And then Suzanne said they had a place to come back to, you know, because you all are there. You started your organizing against racism, where people are deepening their analysis and learning around that. So what are some of the challenges have been? I know Dr. Robinson and Keith can definitely talk about some of those in education, because it seems like sometimes you have to start over. You know, Dr. Robinson, I remember me, you, Keith, and Suzanne. I can't remember the schools that we were in. But, you know, it just seems like, you know, we have to hit the reset button again, because you've got such a large school district. I mean, huge. You have a large school district, and so many students, and it is a big machine. It is a big, complex thing to push. And then, you know, all of the school partners, you know, the healthcare, the nonprofit, the educational advocates, the early childhood, you know, all of those kinds of things going on. And so can some of you talk about some of the challenges that you've had, you know, doing this work, and that, you know, when you've had to start over or hit the reset button? I don't know if you and Keith want to talk first about, you know, because the school system launches, you know, we'll launch an initiative and a program, you know, in a blink of an eye. And we also know that we can look at it and tell, you know, things are, you know, sound good, and, you know, they're part of that best practices menu. But we also know that we've seen them before. And unfortunately, you know, we're still dealing with these staggering, persistent inequities.
So I guess I'll go. So I don't know. I can't identify the reset time. I just I see the times where I just stopped and said, okay, let's put our head down and go forward again, right? So maybe that's the reset time. But I don't know. To me, the biggest thing is for me, the biggest lesson learned is that we have to get people in small groups, relatively small groups, to talk about their work, right? So even in the Racial Equity Institute alumni that I hope for, and it's targeted for district people, not exclusively for district people, even in there, where I tried to identify different areas of work to talk about, they're still scattered, right? So like if I'm a classroom teacher, my conversation is really very different than if I'm in the department that writes curriculum, right? And so until we can talk about the work that I do, then it doesn't get personal enough, in my opinion, to make the mindset shift start working, because people have to think about it, right? It's such really a different view of the world that you have to constantly think about it, read about what other people are doing, and share with other folks, and not be afraid to say, you think I have this wrong, right? But until it gets personal, you know, it's just like the example in REI about the doctors who would all identify that, yeah, other doctors have racial disparities in their outcomes, but let me look at mine, right? And then look at, why do I have those disparities? And so I don't know how we change the system until we change the chunks within the system. So I don't know. I'm just stuck there, that's what we have to do. So,
You know, I think also for anyone that's ever worked for an organization, definitely a system, it's slow moving, right? This work is slow moving, but to change anything in an organization or agency is a different kind of slow moving. You're often combating traditional way of thinking, policies that have been around for so long, as we know, that how to uproot those and really think of them in another way. I know that organizations don't have that expertise to do it. And so we have in Palm Beach County now many more people that can offer that expertise. But way back when, it was probably Chuck and Dr. Robinson and Barbara on the scene to do all of it for everybody in the whole county. And so I think that has been a major challenge, that as more people get trained, more people educate themselves, we see more equity efforts and activities. There are more places to plug in to really do that internal work, to see, bigger change. I know the Birth to 22 initiative, United for Brighter Futures, it's a partnership of Children's Services Council and Palm Beach County. And they, in the last year, became the first Florida member of the Government Alliance for Race Equity. And so now all of a sudden for organizations, they can become an associate of this membership. And there is tips and tools and monthly webinars that organizational administrators can be a part of, to have that constant conversation with other organizational leaders, not just in Palm Beach County, but across the nation, to do that internal dive. And so I see a lot more organizations having the ability to do that self-assessment. And they have like 1,000 memberships, and they should all be full, but they're not. And so again, that's a challenge for those CEOs and administrators who do get it, to talk their counterparts from other organizations into getting it too, because now the resources are more readily available in Palm Beach County. I will say, another one is challenges, and I say this lovingly, but boards. You could have a CEO and the vice presidents who have gone through the Racial Equity Institute, they're participating in reflection groups, they're sending all their staff. And if their board won't go, then it is really hard to make that full switch. And so we do see board members going now. We see CEOs that are insisting that all board members go, but that's also slow moving. And so how do you commit to equity within your organization if your board members won't commit to, and or they're not representative of the community? Our boards need to look like our community. And so that is a challenge in itself.
If I can add in just regarding some of the pitfalls,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we talk about changing policy, because policy can, what I've learned is that changing policy doesn't necessarily change practice. So it's definitely important. It's a start, because then you can be held accountable. Why are you out laughing, Dr. Robinson? So years ago, I remember when we went to do some significant changes to our student code of conduct and changing our discipline practices, all gung ho, talking about then that was probably a point where we started disaggregating data, and like, oh my God, wasn't that a big shift, talking about controlling for race and gender and looking at suspension rates. So one, just to have that awakening, but then to change the policy, thinking that would change practice, doesn't happen without a lot of layers of support, a lot of layers of education, bringing people along to understand. So that was, obviously we continue to struggle with it. It's still a challenge, but I think because of certain practices and changing that policy, we've added additional supports to address those disparities and address those students, our Black students who needed those additional supports. But I think one thing is that just because you're trying to change policy, it's not going to necessarily change practice. But it is a big first step that has to happen. Just, I think it was last night, I think Dr. Robinson shared the conversation earlier about when we were talking about the conversation the school board is having. And then I think Dr. Robinson said something about, do y'all know we have an equity policy? And So we have that policy, then how do we, actually start acting on that particular policy and really, be more strategic in how we use that. And it takes a lot of people to educate one about the policy, and then what does that mean for your particular practice? I think what Lauren was saying about the gatekeeping, what does that mean in each piece of work? But it's hard. You're going to go in with good intentions, but there's just so many roadblocks and so many things that you have to think through and get allies along your side to help move the work forward.
Yeah, that's so appreciated. Dr. Robinson and I are just cracking up because, I feel you. And I relate this to what's happening now, Keith, as people are talking about law enforcement reform. And, it's like Minneapolis had these policies in place. As a matter of fact, they were saying that Minneapolis was a model of progressive police reform. So everybody's trying to figure out, how to change policies. And it's like, but this happened under those policies. And when I think about, we're working, I got a letter today working with some former students that want to change the curriculum. I'm like, you all had a legislative mandate to change the curriculum since 1994. And so, and you've tried and, it hadn't happened. So I really appreciate that. I said this earlier and I'll say it again. Old Peter Drucker said, that culture and structure eat policy for breakfast. And so, when we're just doing the lake thing or the policy thing alone, if we're not doing other things simultaneously, it'll just show back up, So I really appreciate that. Suzanne?
No, I just, every time. If policy change worked 100%, it's not that it's not important.
Right.
It's not an either or. And we would be in a very different place. But culture will snap it right back. And it does every time. And so building that strength. Yeah. Building that strength to speak that truth that Chuck talked about, that's organizing. That's the name of the game.
Dina, I did.
Suzanne, do you mind if I add to? Oh, I'm sorry, Monica. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
So, and this is so rich because I've lived through one of the advantages. I haven't made it to the eldest stage. I've only been organizing 38 years. I got 12 more years of service before they're going to allow me in. But they let me get the coffee and buy the breakfast. So I've seen us do the policy. I've seen us do the programs. I've seen a little of the practice change. What I haven't seen change is the power dynamic. That in Palm Beach County is the most resistant part. And so, I've seen, I'm glad of the work that you and Bob are doing, Lauren, but I've seen this before. I can't tell you the amount of times in Palm Beach County that the funding groups have put themselves and their staff. This is the third iteration of that, through the same language of coming through. Where it don't change is the power. And I can tell you that communities aren't looking for services. We appreciate it. I'm not saying that that's not important, but we're trying to amass power so that we can begin to have control and self-determination. And for Palm Beach County, I'm going to see a difference, not when I see the CEOs of the funding institutions coming to REI training. I'm going to see the difference when you have a city like Delray stop being resistant to passing a public document created and led by community called the Set Transformation Plan. I will see the change when the very school that came, the one school that came out of this analysis is Village Academy. When the school district is not being so resistant that they don't understand the relationship between those who built it and understand what that power looks like. One of the things I always love hearing, and the first time I heard it was with David, is about the housing authority. And I think that might have been, or this project in New Orleans, where the residents themselves are running it. Now, I don't know that they're running it perfect, but it builds that power dynamic. It creates a whole different thing. I mean, you see that occurring more in Palm Beach County. Then the organizing and this REI work is then beginning to take root in a way that is demonstrating that now we might just be beginning to get to a place that we're understanding.
Yeah, Dina, I failed to tell people to drop questions in the chat. I see that there have been a couple of questions there, but people are certainly invited to do that. We have about 10 minutes left, and some of those questions could be entertained. I do like to, towards the close of this, always ask the question that, so we're now living in the throes of a pandemic, which has structurally changed everything about the way we do what we do. We are in the midst of the killing of George Floyd, among the multitude of other Black men who have been unarmed Black men that have been killed. We are now addressing racial unrest, but this racial unrest is very different than previous racial unrest, because I've heard several of our broadcasters or media commentators say that different than the 60s, there may be more white folks on the street than there are people of color. And so I have to ask a school system that this series is titled Beyond This Moment. And Suzanne said something earlier. She said the one advantage you all had is that you didn't have to go out and create something, you already have something. But my question would be, how do we take the climate of the circumstances that we're in? What should be the projection of the Palm Beach County School District and movement forward, and still addressing disparities and disparities that are profound?
Okay, so you said school district, so I'm gonna jump in. How about that? So my first comment is not exactly on point, but I feel the need to say it. So I also am 63 years old, and I was taken to the riots in Detroit on a field trip, right, to understand and have it explained to me why people were so frustrated, and so forth. And so I have a personal view of the civil rights movement that I hope does not repeat. That view is that white folks and Black folks were locked arm in arm singing "We Shall Overcome" until Black folks said, this is our struggle. We're gonna lead it. We want white allies, and we want you to follow us and support us, right? When Black folks said that, the white folks went to save the manatees, okay? So I just need, I'm hoping, right, that does not happen here, right? You know, I tell people I'm thankful to Steve Jobs, I think is his name, for inventing the iPhone. So we have all these videos, because all this killing of our men and our women has been done for centuries, right? But it's now on TV. That's the difference. And so now I think we see all these folks, Black and white, who can no longer explain it away. I'm sure that there was some reports in the past that I also bought the company line, that he must have been resisting arrest or whatever, right? But now that we see it on TV, we have to start checking ourselves, right? So anyway, so I needed to say that because I am hoping that we can that this generation can stay locked in arms and fighting this fight, right? But the cynical side of me is ready for the white folks to realize that, oh, wait a minute. I don't, does that mean I had to give up some of my comfort, right? And so, and when that happens, then people will walk away. The other thing, in terms of the school district, we have to start learning, I hope, to listen to voices, even if it's not many of them, right? So let me give you an example. A year ago, we had this big brouhaha about a principal who said some stupid stuff that was interpreted as anti-Semitic, right? I'm not even gonna get into the validity of that, but that man ended up being removed from his position. We got phone calls from around the world, nasty emails from around the world, right? I never before had newspapers in New York and DC calling me, okay? Now, but if you do Black folks wrong, if somebody holds up the disparity in graduation rates or reading scores or choose your metric, right? If somebody holds that up, right? There's no voices out there screaming and hollering that the district can hear, right? Now, again, I'm gonna go back to the recent board meeting when we had an hour's worth of phone calls, but why does it take all that, right? Why does it take all that? Because of the history in this country, Black folks are less likely to be in a position where they are able to go to the school board meeting or feel empowered to speak their truth, right? Why does it take, 60 Black folks saying the same exact damn thing for somebody to hear, right? You should have heard me the first time I said it, right? I'm getting some nasty emails about some comments I made yesterday about the start of school, and they telling me I intentionally want to block out the voice of parents. Well, that's not true, but I know that this system intentionally blocks out the voice of Black folks. And we say crap like we need a critical mass. Why we need a damn critical mass? The critical mass should be like 1 or 2. Like and it shouldn't have to be a school board member, somebody mama, anybody mama, their voice should be just as loud as those folks calling from wherever they were calling from, calling us anti-Semitic. And until we figure out how to fine tune our hearing aid, then we don't mean this equity stuff, right? Because the power dynamic says that some people have voice and agency and some don't. And if we want to work on equity, we need to make sure we are intentionally listening, tuning our hearing aids into that voice, that little voice over there who might be working 3 jobs trying to survive, but they care about their children just like everybody else. Okay, I'm gonna be done.
I know we're on time, but real quickly, I think moving forward, because of these recent events, is we're definitely looking at when students come back on our campuses and our adults, of how do we have, again, system-wide conversations around race and address this head on. But I want to quickly share a story. It was a couple of weeks ago, maybe during all this, I was having a meeting with our principal supervisors, if you will, and there's roughly about, there's like 15 of them, and I would say 7 identify as Black. And so I had shared an article about this and about the long history of racism in our country. And it's just to talk about it and then talk about how people were feeling. So I think the meeting was scheduled for about an hour. We ended up going, like the whole meeting was just devoted to people talking. And what I heard, and I've heard stories from my Black colleagues and in the past just about the things that they have to go through on a day-to-day basis that I don't experience as a white person. But to hear it this time was so, like, gives me chills right now just talking about it. To hear like everyone, my Black colleagues in that meeting talk about, I'm just tired and I'm tired. And the pain in the voice just, struck a different chord in me that, I hadn't heard before. To just, for me, it was so important just about how, again, me being white, to make sure that when we come back to school that things are going to be different for them, because they're just so sick and tired of the constant microaggressions, constant being stopped, etc. Every single one of my Black colleagues wanted to talk and get it out, and how important for us as white people to sit and listen in it and really hear the struggle so that we can change. So I'll stop there.
I don't know if we're out of time, but I think it's hopefully a next step. It's already happening in some, the Healthier Together communities are doing it, but the next step, if anyone's familiar with Arnstein's ladder of participation, is, and Dr. Robinson was putting this in the chat boxes, we can't have, we know that institutions are holding the problem in place. And so we can't just have community conversations every so often or put out a resident survey to see what people think. We need to, at that top of that ladder, the participation has to be citizen control. It has to be, you know, not just having people come to the table sometimes, but they have to be a part of all the decisions, which means they have to be at the table all the time. And so that is a lot of the piece that I hope Be Well is encouraging and we're working on, is that, you know, it's not me doing the talking, it's all the people I'm inviting to be on our board, in our work groups, doing the work. And it's residents that represent our community to make the decisions. And I'm just there to help them where if they need the help, to, you know, talk to other leaders, see the work through. We have a really powerful, very active Palm Beach County residents, which is so amazing. And so sometimes even as systems, we just need to get out of the way and let them do what they do best, right? And so that's what I think about from my gatekeeper role, is where can I make sure my table includes and that I'm not doing the talking, but then also where do I just need to step aside so I'm not getting that, I don't create barriers for the work that can get done.
So Dina, if you and Suzanne have closing words, I want to thank everybody, all of the team that is Palm Beach County, and for sharing, because again, our constant responses from this series has been is that people are picking up and inspired with ways of knowing that other districts, other institutions, other systems, how folks are using this and how folks are institutionalizing this, because that's really the goal. But Suzanne and Dina, anything?
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, we love you. We're like family. We've been together through so much and for so long, and to just count you among, you know, the people that we admire and respect so much in doing this. And thank you for making us semi-residents of Palm Beach County. You know, all the other trainers always say, well, when can we go? And it's like, they just request us. So I don't know when you're going to be out there. So we don't take you for granted. We are so.
That's why none of the rest of us know y'all, by the way, Dr.
we are honored to know you and to be fueled by the things that you're doing. So no, you're not alone. And thank you so much for being here.
Suzanne?
That's exactly what I was going to say, of course. We are not alone. We are not alone. This work is happening all over this country. And it is great, good news and so heartening. And Chuck, while we might not ever get to quit, I'm a few years ahead of you in those numbers. That's going to be all right.
Well, I want to say to everybody, I hope that you will join us next week. We are going to be talking about structural and institutional racism, but not localizing it to any one town. We're going to have system leaders from across the country, because Dina and I have been inspired that more systems leaders are using the terminology structural and institutional racism, but we're not so convinced that they fully grasp and understand what it is. So yeah, Dr. Robinson, we're gonna slam next week. So I'm inviting all of you to come with us, and we apologize for our technical difficulties, but I promise if you hang on, you're gonna get a word, okay? So thank you, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much, Palm Beach County.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.